the Chinese economy is confronted with significant hardships. And among the limited options available, there are only two paths more likely to render viable remedies: full reintegration into the global system or a short-term real estate sector boost to prevent an immediate collapse while exploring alternative solutions. However, these options have either been rejected by Xi or pose substantial challenges. Why reintegration into the international system could save China's economy? It's because this integration has been the primary catalyst for China's remarkable economic growth over the past 4 decades. It has long been recognized that China's economy thrives on 3 pillars: investment, consumption, and exports. Investment primarily focuses on real estate and government infrastructure projects. However, China's real estate market is a huge bubble, offering little to the foundation of a robust economy despite generating temporary growth. The excessive infrastructure investments aimed at bolstering GDP suffer from the same issue, rendering the first pillar, investment, unreliable. The second pillar is consumption. In reality, the overall consumption among the Chinese population is not robust. Despite efforts by the CCP to stimulate consumption effectively, the core challenge lies in China's skewed wealth distribution, resembling an inverted T-shape. A small number of affluent individuals coexist with the majority of less fortunate citizens. The consumption of the wealthy few cannot drive the entire economy. Hence, the true driving force behind China's economy is its third pillar, manufacturing exports. China's status as the world factory is the core foundation of its economy. Moreover, since China initiated reform and opened its door to the West, close ties with developed countries have propelled advancements in Chinese science, technology, and business operations. Chinese students educated abroad returned as high-tech professionals, and foreign companies operating in China injected capital, technology, and advanced Western management practices into the nation, forming the bedrock of China's technological and commercial progress. If China can replicate this model, there remains a potential path for the Chinese economy to recover. So, can China reintegrate into the international system? This path seems to be closing. Chinese Premier Li Qiang recently led the delegation to the G20 summit in India. Xi Jinping's absence gives the impression that he is reluctant to engage with the leaders of the world's wealthiest and most influential countries. Some analysts speculated that his absence may be due to significant domestic political pressure, China's weak economy, or strained relations with the host country, India. Whatever the reason, this is not an effective approach if China wishes to rejoin the international system. In fact, as of 2023, Xi Jinping has only made 3 foreign trips, all to countries friendly to the Chinese Communist Party. This is a significant departure from his previous practice of making around at least 10 foreign trips per year before the COVID pandemic. In addition, the outcome of U.S. Commerce Secretary Raimondo's recent visit to China and subsequent developments remain unclear. While the meetings established a mechanism for regular communication between the two sides, Raimondo stated that China and the U.S. are deeply interconnected economically, and the U.S. hopes for China's economic well-being since any troubles in China's economy would severely affect the U.S. She even mentioned trimming down the list of companies subject to chip sanctions, allowing China to continue purchasing some lower-end chips. However, when it comes to the high-end chips that China values most, Raimondo told CNN's State of the Union this.
We ship billions of dollars of semiconductors every year to China. That is good for the American economy and American businesses, and we will continue to do that. Those are chips that are readily available around the world, that are almost a commodity at this point. What we are going to do, and we will not compromise on, is preventing the sale of our most sophisticated, most powerful semiconductors to China, which China wants for its military.
Moreover, President Biden recently issued executive orders authorizing the U.S. Treasury Secretary to prohibit or restrict U.S. investments in Chinese entities in 3 sectors: semiconductors and microelectronics, quantum information technologies, and certain artificial intelligence systems. This will undoubtedly have a significant impact on China's industrial upgrading. Indeed, the Chinese Communist Party has come to realize that the U.S.-China relations were unlikely to return to their previous state when the United States wholeheartedly engaged China in terms of market access, financial support, technology assistance, and management training, among other things. Nevertheless, these are precisely the elements that China's current economy requires. Beijing's strongest argument to the West may now be, if China falters or its economy collapses, the entire world economy, including the United States and the West, will suffer a severe impact. Therefore, you should not let China's economy collapse, but rather, you should help us as much as possible.
他们有3年多没有见面了。
However, Xi Jinping's preferred approach to seeking Western assistance doesn't involve extending the olive branch, but rather relies on leveraging and coercion to compel the West to conform to China's demands. For instance, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi explicitly stated in July of this year that China opposes the establishment of guardrails in its relationship with the United States. This stance is exemplified by China's refusal to establish regular communication channels with the U.S. military, effectively forcing the U.S. to unilaterally draw red lines for itself. According to Reuters, diplomats representing various countries in China have reported increasing difficulties in reaching Chinese officials and accessing information about China. Rener, a foreign policy analyst at the Australian consulate in Hong Kong, noted that under Xi Jinping's stringent rule, officials have become more cautious in their dealings with foreign powers. Understandably, Xi Jinping is looking for alternatives to the West. But neither the BRICS nor the Belt and Road Initiative can replace the West. Xi Jinping's current strategy may involve enlarging the internal circulation, which is the domestic cycle of production, distribution, and consumption, by including countries that are friendly to China. In the context of dwindling hope for the West, China has rolled out a number of intensive real estate stimulus policies over the past few weeks. These measures include reducing minimum down payment for mortgages to 20% for first-time buyers and 30% for second-time buyers nationwide, and remove various purchase restrictions in big cities. Additionally, interest rates on new mortgages are being significantly reduced by around 40 percentage points after the central bank lowered the minimum premium to its benchmark loan prime rate. Furthermore, many cities have removed various restrictions on property purchases. These measures signify that China is making significant efforts to provide stimulus to the real estate sector, aiming to prevent an economic collapse and buy time to seek a way out. These actions have indeed had an effect. Stocks of Chinese real estate companies have surged substantially. According to the Wall Street Journal, by September 6th, China Evergrande Group rose by 27%, Shimao Group by 25%, Joy City Property by 9.2%, and Sonic China Holdings by 68%. The Hang Seng Mainland Real Estate Index increased by 3.1%, despite a 0.8% decline in the broader market. Nevertheless, this is essentially a stopgap measure at best. It may at most prop up the Chinese economy for another year or two. The long-term perspective for the Chinese real estate market remains seriously oversupplied. According to Chinese media, there are enough houses in China to accommodate 3 billion people, while the population is in decline. The removal of purchase restrictions in this round of stimulus policies primarily targets wealthy individuals in China, hoping they will invest in real estate and buy multiple properties as they did in the past. However, affluent buyers in the property market are not driven by necessity. They follow market trends. 15 years ago, everyone buying homes believed that prices would keep rising indefinitely, despite the theoretical impossibility of this scenario. They couldn't see the foreseeable future when the bubble would burst. Consequently, everyone poured money into it. But now the prevailing perception is that this real estate recovery is temporary. Therefore, those investing in real estate now generally view it as a short-term speculative venture, hoping to cash out and exit quickly. This is starkly different from the situation 15 years ago. When this inflated bubble ultimately bursts, its impact will be even more severe. Another scenario that could temporarily prevent a collapse of China's real estate industry is delay. This is possible because China does not operate as a purely market-driven economy. China's real estate market isn't solely governed by commercial principles. Various levels of the Chinese government have significant interest in the real estate market. Each local government also has its own banks. Therefore, all local governments have an incentive to use administrative measures to prop up banks and especially state-owned real estate enterprises. In essence, while these enterprises may be heavily indebted, the government steps in to shoulder their debt through various means, preventing their collapse. However, this simply spreads the pain of each enterprise across the entire economy. When this pain becomes pervasive, the entire economy ceases to function. This is the reckoning moment. Socialist countries in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union had walked down this path. So, whether it's stimulating the real estate market by issuing favorable policies or the government using administrative means to prevent a real estate collapse, it's essentially a slow form of self-destruction. Xi Jinping's decision to take this path indicates that he is running out of options. If there were any other ways to rescue the Chinese economy, he wouldn't resort to inflating the real estate bubble further. This approach also contradicts his own policies in the last decade, during which he was determined to deflate the real estate bubble. He's now moving in the opposite direction, and the only reason is to buy time for the Chinese economy to find a way out in the next year or two. In reality, finding an economic pillar to replace real estate and exports, especially under the technology sanctions from the West, is an extremely challenging task. However, Beijing has no choice but to remain hopeful. Perhaps in Xi Jinping's mind, there are many maybes. For a massive country that relies on maybes to design its future path, what we should be truly concerned about is not its rise, but the dangers that its decline could pose. Now, it may be time to start thinking about the next steps.